Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's DAF, Bava Metzia DAF Nun Vav. We are holding on Nun Hey Amid Beis, 9 lines off the bottom of the Amid. So in yesterday's Mishnah we learned that if one consumes Truma of Demai, Trumas Maser Shal Demai, he did it B'shoigeg, he must pay the actual value, right? The keren, right? He has to give back the same amount of fruit plus a chaimesh plus a fifth. And the Gemara asked, well, the whole concept of Trumas Maser of Demai is merely midrabanan because Demai, which is the produce purchased from Men Ha'Ma'aretz, whose commitment to Truma and Maser separation is questionable. So the obligation to readdress that produce and take off Truma Maser as though it requires it is only midrabanan because most likely, right? Most do. Most Ami Aretz do observe it and do it properly, but we do it anyways midrabanan. So to say that we treat it like as though it was Trumas Maser min HaTorah, which triggers the chaimesh repayment, the chaimesh add-on as well. That's a big chiddush. The Gemara asked on that, and the Gemara responded, yes, actually it's Rabbi Meir speaking, who we find elsewhere as well. This is by the get, which was handed to the Isha, delivered without that proclamation of B'fanei Nichtav, B'fanei Nechtam. He validates the get despite that whole declaration being only based on a rabbinic concern. So, yeah, Chachamim make chizuk l'divrayim kishal Torah. They apply more or less the same guidelines to the Rabbanans as they do the Iraisa. Okay, so that was yesterday's daf. Now we have a kasha because we're going to find that in a different context, in Maser Sheni, when it comes to converting Maser Sheni, we find a leniency. When it's merely midrabanan, when it comes from Demai, which is that produce whose status is questionable, we give it leniencies. And we don't apply the same guidelines as we do typically. By Maser Sheni min HaTorah, Masiv Rav Sheshes. Here comes a kasha. Mechalin Oisai. And Rashi says, Oisai means Gabe Maser Sheni Shal Demai Katanila. This is a Mishnah referring to, a Brisa referring to Maser Sheni, coming from Demai. So again, it's only midrabanan. And he wants to now transfer the kedusha. You can do that. Mechal and Oisa, you can transfer the kedusha from kesef al kesef. You have a silver coin onto another silver coin. Nechoshes al nechoshes, copper to copper. Kesef al nechoshes, silver to copper. Nechoshes al peiros, silver onto actual peiros, even outside Yerushalayim. V'yachsor v'yiftes ha peiros divrei Rameir. So according to Rameir, you can do all that, but provided that ultimately you went back to from the peiros onto money, which you brought with you to Yerushalayim. Rashi says because on the way up to Yerushalayim you have to be bringing money, because it says v'tzarta hakesef yadecha. So ultimately you have to transport money to Yerushalayim. Where are you going to spend it? V'chachamim oimrim, you don't need to do that. We're lenient and we don't have to actually transfer it back onto money. You can take the money itself up to the fruit itself up to Yerushalayim. Bring up the fruit itself to Yerushalayim. Okay, bottom line, all agree that you can transfer this money onto that money, to that money. No problem doing that. Even kesef onto nechoshes, silver coin onto a copper coin. Kesef al nechoshes. Is that true that when it comes to chilul Maser Sheni, we allow this type of transfer? We find that when it comes to Maser Sheni, the Iraisa, real, Maser Sheni, which is not just the Rabban, it's the Iraisa, we have this limitation. We don't allow this type of transfer. But now we have a Mishnah. Seller shel Maser Sheni, v'shel chulin shenis arvu. A fellow had a coin of Maser Sheni, a coin of chulin, both silver, and they got mixed up. He's not sure what's what, and he'd like to use one of them for his own personal use. So what do? So rather than just say, look, this coin here, is it Maser Sheni good? Otherwise, I'm transferring the Kedusha from the other coin onto this coin. You can't do that. Because that's going to be, in effect, a transfer from kesef to kesef, silver to silver. That's an even transfer. You can't do chilul like that. It has to be on a different type of coin. So what do we do? Maybe besela, he brings a sela worth of mo'is, of copper coins. Okay, so he brings 100 pennies, right? $1 worth of pennies. And he declares as follows: Kol mokim sheyeshno sela shemaser sheni. Wherever the let's call the sela $1, right? So wherever the maser sheni $1 is sitting, micholeles almos halalu, that kedusha will now be transferred onto these coins, onto these coppers. Okay, so now he has copper coins which are kaddish, and he's not done yet. There's one more step. Now he goes back to the 2 selas that he has, and he takes the nicest, most perfect one, which is worth more, right? And he now transfers the kedusha from the copper onto this silver dollar, and he treats it as Maser Sheni. And it's a win-win for Maser Sheni, whether this was really the Maser Sheni or not. End of the day, it's getting the best coin. Now, why couldn't he just do it all in one step? Take one of the silver selas and say, look, is it Maser Sheni? Fine. Otherwise, I'm transferring the kedusha from the other one onto this one. Why do you have to go through the copper and back to the silver? Because the Chachamim teach us, you can be mechalel Maser Sheni when there's some sort of difference. Kesef al nachoshes, right? You can even go from silver to copper. Midoichak, if it's time of necessity, right? Out of necessity, it's not something we do lechatchila. It's you're going to something pretty lowly. Rashi said it's a bezoyon to go to copper coins. Va'oid, says Rashi, the copper will rust or whatever, corrode, right? So typically we don't do that unless there's a special need. But even that is only temporary. Lo yiskaim kain. You're not meant to leave it that way. Ela shechayzer u'mechalon ala kesef. So you jump over to the copper temporarily, and then you bring it back to the silver for the final chilul. Bottom line is, katani miyas. What did the halacha just tell us? Mechalon midoichak. Then when it's a time of doichak, such as in this case where you got a mix-up and you're not sure what's what, then we allow this type of chilul. Midoichak in, only if it's midoichak, shlei midoichak lei, but typically we don't do that. So why is it that when it came to the earlier Mishnah, which discussed Demai, we seem to have no qualms with doing chilul from silver to silver, and even silver to copper? So what does that tell us about how we treat Demai? Apparently, it's a notch lower than ordinary Maser Sheni. Okay, so how is that consistent with the halacha in the Mishnah? That one is obligated to pay that added chomesh fee for eating even Demai material. Because here we see that Demai is treated less, severely than regular Maser Sheni. Amar Rav Yosef, Afal Pisha Mekel Rabbi Meir B'Pidyoinai. True, we just discovered that Rabbi Meir is lenient when it comes to being machalal, being poideh Maser Sheni. We sort of relax the guidelines. But machmer hu b'achilasa, when it comes to anything that's consumption related, such as when a person ate Demai material b'shoigeg, we give it the same rules and stringencies as ordinary truma or maser or maser sheni. The Sanya, as we find in a similar brayso, Tisefta Mesechas Demai, that when it comes to achila related concerns, we treat it the same. Lo yitiru limkar demai. Typically, we don't sell a person who's a reliable person. Right? He's a chaver, meaning a person who has a good name and he's established he's been established as a reliable, trustworthy person. He's not allowed to sell tevel or even demai, unless he addresses the truma and maser before he sells it. There's one exception. Who can sell demai? Elul is siton. Siton is a wholesaler who makes very little, commission on his deals. So Chachamim allowed him to avoid the extra expense of having to take off trumas or maser if what he's selling is demai due to the fact that he purchased it from Amaret. And the truth is, as Rashi says, people understand that he has many suppliers, and they don't really expect, right, just because he's a upstanding fellow, but his produce can be from many other suppliers. So people understand it's coming from unidentified sources, and they treat it as such. So nobody can sell demai elo l'siton bilvad, this fellow ubal abayis. Now let's say we have a regular farmer or whatever, parading as a wholesaler today. He's selling out big volumes of produce, but by him it's very different. Ubal abayis benkach. Whether he's selling in large quantities, in wholesale quantities, or even retail, either way, even wholesale, right, wholesale or retail, he is required to do the maser from demai before he sells it. And Rashi says the reason is because in contrast to buying from a distributor, well, he's getting it from many suppliers, you don't expect it to be necessarily from reliable sources. But here by a balabais, people, their notion is that he's selling his own personal product, his own personal growth, his own personal crop. And if he's a chaver, a trustworthy fellow, they'll think that his product likewise is reliable, trustworthy, and kosher. So bottom line is, he has to be careful and take off maser before he sells. Divrei Reb Meir. So we see that Reb Meir is very concerned that people might eat demai, and they say, look, you have to address it on all ends, right? So he's lenient, he's stringent when it comes to eating related issues of demai, as we said before. When it comes to achilo, he's machmer, in contrast to the Rabbanon coming up, who seem to be more lenient as well. So even when it comes to eating, they're also lenient, whether he's a distributor or a balabayis. If they're selling large quantities, there's a special halacha that, like we said before, since you're making very little on the deal, Chachamim suspended the chiyuv of taking off the truma maser, so you can sell and have the buyer, address that on his own. Moicher b'shalech l'chaver can sell and send it. V'nois l'matana, even give gifts. Ve'ene choishish, without concern for demai issues. So bottom line, Reb Meir, although he seems to be mekel when it comes to chilul maser sheni, but not when it comes to achila oriented issues, such as eating demai, mistakenly eating demai, or in the case of the Mishnah, the extra chaimish that you pay upon eating trumas maser of demai. Asks the Gemara, really? Maser Ravina. I have a Mishnah as follows. Halakech man anachte. If a person purchases bread from a baker, ma'aser, and the baker is an Amaretz, unreliable fellow. Ma'aser min achama, let's say nenes, let's say he buys 10 loaves. And one is, warmer than the other ones, indicating that it was baked, today. And the other ones are cooler and a little bit older. Ma'aser min achama, let's say nenes. Let's say nenes al achama. So he's going to take off maser, of course. Does he have to actually snip off a piece from each loaf? No. He can do it from the chama on the tzenenes, from the tzenenes, and account for the chama. So you can do one master for the whole batch. Wow, here's a chiddush. Even if they're shaped differently, coming from different types of forms, which perhaps would indicate to us that the baker had sourced it from different places. Don't worry about it. It's only d'mai, it's a suffix. You can do this sort of package deal, truma and maser, take from one on the whole bunch. Who's speaking? Divrei Reb Meir. So now the question is like this: how can Reb Meir allow us to, resort to this type of leniency? Here it's eating related concerns. You're going to eat this, right? Assuming that it's gemeistered, right? So I understand why Reb Meir would allow us to do from the older bread onto the fresher bread, because, preferably we try to do the best, right, when it comes to Truma and Maser. But when it comes to Dmai, okay, we have that, we relax things a bit. Because technically, even if it's really bad quality, it works. Because if a person has real tevel produce and he decides to take a little extra from the inferior quality to account for the good quality, you're not supposed to do that, but it works. Be careful, don't sin. You want to avoid chet, take the best, the best produce. So this pasuk is teaching us that you meant to prefer the best, but in this very same pasuk, it's also teaching us that if he does not go for the best, he goes for the worst, it still works. That's why he committed a sin. Otherwise, he wouldn't be committing a sin. It wouldn't work, right? If it doesn't work, how did he sin? We learn from here. If a person does take from the inferior quality produce and uses it as truma for the better quality, he's trying to get away with worse, right? We learn from here that it works. So back to the Dmai situation. Typically we try to donate the best, but even if we do second best, it works. And by Dmai we allow you to do that. The whole thing is only, out of uncertainty. That's good. But the other part of the halacha, we have many different shapes and forms. We can take from one onto the other. How do you know where the baker got it from? Maybe, the smaller rectangular forms were from source A, who was an Amaretz, and the rounder forms were from, more circular breads were from source B, who's not an Amaretz. So you're dealing with different statuses here. How can you go and just put it all in one basket? If he's going to take truma from one on the other, maybe they're not of equal stature, of equal status. Maybe one is chiv, one is tur. He's doing from the chiv to the tur, or from the tur to the chiv, which creates all kinds of complications. And here we're speaking about, permitting it la'achila. And so Rameir is speaking. And you just told me Rameir is very stringent when it comes to eating related concerns pertaining to Dmai. Amar Abai, so Abai says like this, up until now, all the kashas, it's all substantiated. But here, this last kasha, I don't agree with. Amar Abai, Rabbi Lezer Shapik kasha le. We go back and backpedal all at the beginning of the sugya. Mishnah says, if a fellow eats trumas masa shot, Maya has to pay a chaimish. Rabbi Lezer had a kasha, what do you mean? It's only the Rabbanon. That's a good kasha, says Abai. Okay, check on that. And the truth is that when Shmuel responded to Rabbi Lezer's kasha by saying, well, Chachamim did chizuk l'divrayim kishal Torah, and he proved it from the case of the get, where there as well Rameir is very machmer. Lo yishaper k'mashanele. It's not a proper answer. Abai disagrees with that. You know why? The kasha did Rabbi Lezer misid beishamayim, because Rabbi Lezer's kasha was based on the Mishnah, it was directed at the Mishnah, where a fellow ate trumas maser of Dmai, which carries with it a misa b'dei shamayim penalty. Right? If it was done, purposely, b'mezit. And its question on that was, well, why when it comes to b'shogeg are we so stringent? Right? That was the starting point of this whole sugya. And Shmuel, in his response, Shmuel responded from a case of a get. Misas bezdin. Look, we find, even by the get, which is only the Rabbanon over there, Rabbi is machmer. Well, the issue by a get, what are the grave consequences for non-adherence to the proper divorce procedures? If an ish goes and gets involved with somebody else, it's misas bed. Bezdin's, Bezdin applies a death penalty. So perhaps dilma shani misas bezdin dechamira. Perhaps something which pertains to misas bezdin as an isha remarrying, it's a notch higher. It's more chomer. It's more strict than eating truma, which although carries misa, but it's misa b'dei shamayim. Right? Again, ish is ish. remarrying, ish, getting involved is misas bezdin, is bezdin's misa, which you find many times through Shas, is considered more strict and more stringent, higher up on the ladder of severity than misas misa b'dei shemayim. I guess b'dei shemayim you could do teshuva or whatever. So in any case, it's more strict, it's more chomer. So perhaps that explains why Reb Meir is very machmer by get-related issues. But who says the same would apply to eating truma? Okay, that's something that Shmuel, that Abaye, critiqued in Shmuel's response. Rav Sheshes lo shaper kamoisiv la lei. And furthermore, when Rav Sheshes asked, we started today with Rav Shesh's kasha, right? He asked, you see, when it comes to Maser Sheni, Reb Meir is not so machmer. Abaye disagrees with that kasha. It's unsubstantiated. It's not a proper matchup. You know why? The Ka'amri inhu misa. Because Shmuel, they were all speaking about misa, related issues. Umoisiv Rav Sheshes lav. But the kasha that Rav Sheshes posed was merely regarding eating Maser Sheni, if it wasn't properly redeemed, so you have an issue of a lav. So perhaps that's not on the same level as get or truma. How could you ask from one onto the other? Well, the mind might Rav Sheshes, but truthfully, after Rav Sheshes did ask this kasha from Maser Sheni, so Rav Yosef, who came afterwards to answer the kasha, that was a proper answer. Okay, so up until now we worked it out. All the steps have now been scrutinized and analyzed and critiqued. And this is the punchline. Elo Ravina. But what about the most recent kasha? Ravina's kasha from the breads and the baker. Adam Yosef ben Nachtem, instead of asking from the Mishnah about the baker and, how can we allow all these breads to be considered to be the same status? That was a kasha. True. But instead of going there, he could have actually supported from a different Mishnah, discussing a palter, that's like a wholesale baker, who sources his material from different places. And actually that's going to support our contention that we are concerned, very concerned when it comes to achila related concerns of demai desnan. If one purchases baked materials from a palter, from a wholesaler, ma'aser min kol tfus u'tfus. Divrei Meir. Here's Reb Meir speaking and telling us that treat each type of bread differently, each form, each brand differently. You know why? Because the palter sources it from different places. So this type may be from the Amoritz, this type not. So therefore you have to treat them separately. So how do you explain this Mishnah in contrast to the other halacha by the baker, where it's all considered one big happy bread basket? Elamais lachlameimar is a very, very big reason, a big distinction between two types of situations. Palter, a wholesaler, mitrei tlasa gavri zavani. Yeah, he purchased from three different types of different sources. He has lots of suppliers, so you have to treat each type separately. Each type on its own, as opposed to a nachtem. Nami michad gavar hu zaven. Typically, a baker has one source for his material, so it's all treated as one. Okay, so that's the answer to the kasha. So bottom line, we had a Mishnah that one eats trumas masra shel d'mai, pays a chaimish. Why? It's just d'mai. Well, chachamim osu chizuk l'divreim k'shal Torah. And although we find that when it comes to pidyon, we're mekel, but that's only pidyon. When it comes to achila, we're machmer. What about the baker? Well, we treat it all as one because it's coming from the same source. Rava says, look, let's go back a minute. We had this kasha on the Mishnah. Why are we so strict by Trumas Maser Shal D'mai to require a chaimish? Well, says Shmuel, We find likewise by get, Rabbi Meir is machmer. So Abai had a kash on that. What do you mean? Get is misas bezdin, which is more strict than truma, which is misas b'dei shamayim. Rabbi Amar, no. Rabbi says it's perfectly fine. It's a perfect match. It's a perfect response. Shmuel shapik mashanet lei. Shmuel's response was a perfect response. Shem yisavoilam. The fact is, the consequence by non-adherence to the get procedure is misas bezdin. The fact is, the consequence to non-adherence to the halachas of achila, of trumas maser, if Israel eats trumas maser, it also carries with it a misa consequence. True, one is b'dei shemayim, one is b'dei adam, but they're close enough. Shem misa ba'olam. Ultimately, it's all a matter of misa, of death. It's a very similar circumstance, and therefore we rightfully compare the two, and we draw an analysis from one to the other. Continues the Mishnah. So we speak so much about oinah, taking care not to cheat, not to overcharge, not to underpay, right? But there are some exceptions to the rule. Elu dvorim she'ein lahem oinah. In the following cases, the halachas of oinah don't apply. And it's based on psukim, right? So even though there was an overcharge or whatever, the halachas do not apply. What are these items? Ha'avadim, you purchase a slave. Ashtoris, you sell a loan document. V'akarkois, real estate. V'akdeshes, a treasurer of the Hegdish sells off some assets. There's no oinah. Ein lan tashlim kefil. Likewise, if a fellow steals these items, he doesn't pay double. If it's an animal and he shechted it or he sold it, there's no 4 or 5 times, which is typical payment for a ganav, stealing from an ordinary person. And all these avodim and shtar, etc., are exempted from other halachas as well. Shem rechinam ein nishba. Fellow was entrusted to wash these things free of charge. He doesn't have to make a shvua that he was careful. But if a fellow took upon himself to wash these things for a fee, and it gets stolen, he doesn't have to pay. So basically, all these things are exempted from the halachas of shemrim. Rabbi Shimon Aimer, well, when it comes to a carbon, it really depends. Let's say a person committed himself to bringing a carbon. He says, Arei Alai, I'm committing to bring an oila. So he's chai b'achrayis. It identifies with him as a person. So there, if the carbon, let's say, the animal got a blemish and it was sold, yesh lan oino, the halachas do not apply because, as Rashi says, since he's responsible for the well-being of this animal, it relates to him, and it's included in the pasuk al toinu ish es achiv, don't cheat your brother, because basically it's your item being sold to your brother. But if it's a carbon for which he carries no personal responsibility, Rashi says, for instance, going to Amar Harezu, he turns to an animal and says, this is going to be an oila, so if it gets lost or stolen, I'm not responsible. So it doesn't really identify with him, it's just plainly a carbon, and therefore if it's sold, there's no oinah applied to it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, we have more exceptions as well. Likewise, if a fellow sells a sefer Torah, an animal, or a diamond, these are specialty items, and sometimes a person will overcharge for them, and the person is willing to pay an inflated price if he really needs these items. So oinah does not apply. They told him no. We disagree. Oinah applies to everything except for the items mentioned at the beginning of the Mishnah. How do we know that in fact the halachos of oinah do not apply to the 4 items mentioned at the outset of the Mishnah? Avodim, shtares, karkois, and hekdeshes. So when you sell or you buy, be careful not to defraud your company. It says, you purchase it by handing it over. An item, something which can be transferred from hand to hand. As opposed to yotzu karkois, real estate, which cannot be transferred by hand, she'ena metatlin. Yotzu avadim, as opposed to slaves as well. Shehukshul karkois, because halachically they're connected to karka. Rashi says, based on a pasuk, based on chaltam oisam, you're meant to inherit your slaves, and the pasuk relates it to your estate, and it has a din of real estate. What else is exempted from oinah? Yotzur shtaros, right? If a person sells a loan document, you sell an item, merchandise. So we learn from here, misha gufoy mocher. v'gufay kanoi. It applies strictly to something which you sell for the value of the item itself, and you buy the item itself. Yatzur shtar, as opposed to documents, you're not looking for the piece of paper. She'en gufan machor, ve'en gufan kanoi. You're not buying or selling the paper per se. The purpose is to provide proof, documentation for the content of that paper. So halachas, if I know, do not apply. It's not inherent sale. It's sort of selling this to gain control of something else, right? But so based on this formula, we learn if a person sells a shtar chayv to a perfume maker, so he's going to use the parchment as wrapping, as a sort of a plug for his perfume bottles. So here he's actually buying it for the sake of the material. So now the shtar is treated like any other document, like any other object, like any other item, and therefore Inoah does apply if he was overcharged. Yesh lema Inoah. Pshita, well, obviously, I mean, if it's being sold as an item, then yeah, lafukim Rav Kahana. The chiddush is, as opposed to Rav Kahana, the Rav Kahana, ein Inoah the prutes, kamash one yesh Inoah the prutes. We learned this the other day, according to Rav Kahana. When one overcharges a pruta or two, right? Even if it's a sixth of the total amount, let's say it was meant to be sold for 6 and sold for 7, but if the Inoah pertains to copper coins, that's insignificant, that's negligible, and there's no din Inoah unless you get to the point of silver coins. So Kamash wants to, the point here is no, even when it comes to these parchments, which are virtually worthless, and it's just a matter of a couple of pennies, one way or the other, Yesh Inoah, the pruta is, even if the Inoah pertains to copper coins, Inoah does apply. And finally, we have Ekdeshos. These are exempted from Inoah as well. Amakro, the pasuk says, right? Altoinu ishas achiv, only if it pertains to, ordinary common people as opposed to hekdesh. Achiv v'le hekdesh. Maskav l'Rabba bar Mamel. So this whole thing was based on, right? The drasha was based on kanoi miyada mitecha, something which is being handed from hand to hand as opposed to real estate, etc. You mean to say that when the Torah uses this type of terminology, kanoi miyad, it means literally taken from one hand to the other? Maskav l'Rabba bar Mamel. When it says yada in the Torah, yada mamashu means literally his hand, as opposed to his possession or his domain or his estate. It means literally sitting in his hand. What about a pasuk which says like this? He grabbed the territory from Moav. Vayikach is called Artzem Yada. He took it from his hand. I mean, you think he had it sitting in his hands? You mean his land was sitting in his hands? Yada have a naked law. Rather, Yada in that context can mean from his control. It was wrested from his control. So perhaps here as well, economy yad amitecha means you purchase it from your friends, ownership. And that could apply to real estate too. Right? Says the Gemara, well, let's go the other way. You mean to say when it says yada in the Torah, it does not mean literally his hand, really? Is that what you're suggesting? Tanya, Bava Bryce, listen to this. A person steals an item. If the item was discovered in his hand, so he stole it with his hands. He has to pay back kefil, right? So perhaps it only applies if he physically stole it with his hands. What about if he stole it through his property? Gaga, his rooftop, chatzero, his yard, karfifa, his storage area. Meaning, let's say he notices his friend's animal roaming into his backyard and he quickly shuts the door. So it was the chatzer that actually trapped the animal. He stole by way of his property. What happens there? Does he pay double? Minayin? Tamalema? Yeah. Imi matzeh timatzeh. That repetitious lashon tells you mikol mokim. Even this triggers kefil. Well, so what do we see? Time with the kasav rachmani matzeh timatzeh. That's only because we have this repetition. Otherwise, Havamina would say kol echad chasav yadu yadei mamishu. And since the Torah says imi matzeh timatzeh biyadai, means literally in his hands. He stole by way of his hands. So we see yad means literally his hands. Vesu, we have another ayah to this. Tani, we have a brayso regarding get. Right? We delivered the get to the Isha. What words does the Torah use to describe that delivery? They placed it in her hands. And the Gemara, same discussion. Perhaps it only works if it was placed directly into her hands. What about her property? What about her rishus? Gaga, chatzira, v'kafriga menayt, amaleimar, v'nasan mikol malkim, any place that is placed. Works. Tama de Kosav. Right, Rashi says, because rather than saying, ubiyada yitznenu, right, it was in her hands, it was placed as v'nasan biyada. V'nasan is coming to include all types of deliveries. So bottom line is, time in the Kosav Rachmana v'nasan, that's only because the Torah reworded it like that. Otherwise, I would say mamash. But when it says v'nasan biyada, it means literally our hands. So on the one hand, we attempted to highlight a place in the Torah where yada means domain, and here we see yada means mamash. Ella rather called yada mamash. True. The default assumption is the simple meaning of yada means your hands, as we find by Ganav, we find by Get, where we need that special drasha to expand it to to Rishus as well. Veshani Hasan, and likewise by Aina, Kanev yada mitecha means your friend's hands. When you purchase an item that can be transferred from hand to hand, as opposed to karka. But there's one remaining location, that pasuk by Moyav, right? Veshani Hasan, there it's different. There, we're compelled to learn that yada, right? Vayikach is called artzam yada. Doesn't mean literally his hand; it's impossible. But it means from his rishus. But that's an exception to the rule. That's one off. But the simple, basic meaning of yada means literally his hands. Boy Rabbi Zeir. Okay, so karka is exempted from ayna. What about schirus, a rental? Yesh lo ayna, or yein lo ayna. Does ayna apply there or not? Let's say he was overcharged on his rental. Shall we say memkar amrach manavlei schirus? Sorry, we're not talking about. Let's backtrack. not real estate. He rents a car. He rents a behema. Schirus yesh lo yayno, ayin lo yayno. Does ayno apply to rentals as well? Memkar amar chmanav schirus. Shall we say on the one hand, the Torah speaks about a sale, having ayno, so perhaps only a sale, not schirus. Aydil mohor, you can say lishna. Doesn't matter. If you overpay, you overpay. Amalei abaye. Of course, ayno applies to rentals as well. Miksiv memkar lo'ilam. True. The pasuk mentions a memkar, but who says it means a permanent sale? Memkar stamaksiv. It just says memkar. V'hainami b'yaymei. And guess what? A rental b'yaymei mechirhi. For the actual rental day, it's called a sale. It was sold for that day. Actually, Tesis brings a different Gemara where we don't seem to sort of equate rentals to sales completely, but Tesis says over here we have an extra pasuk. It says Gabaynoksiv memkar miyuter. It says Simkru memkar. So it's coming to teach us that we'll even include a rental as well, because there's an element, there's an aspect of a sale there too. You sort of bought the rights to use it for the rental period, so therefore it's included in the halachas of ayna. Boy Rabbi, comes a new shaila. Chitin v'zoren b'karka mahu. We have kernels of wheat, which were embedded in the ground, they were planted. How do we treat them? Like karka, without ayna, or is it still considered an item which can have ayna? Yesh lam ayna, or ein lam ayna. Shall we say command the shadyan bekada dami? Although it's sitting in the ground, it's as though it's sitting in a container. Command the shadyan, it's like it was placed bekada in a pitcher in a container. Damyan, we treat it like that. Yesh lam ayna, and therefore ayna applies. Or batlun al gab ara. No, it becomes nullified, it becomes part of the ground. Now, what exactly happened? Where was the cheat? Are we speaking where a farmer asked the supplier to insert 6 pounds of kernels into the ground? And the Edom came and testified they only put 5 pounds in there. So the question is whether he can claim Aina. Well, of course he could. Rava says there's no issue in this case. Of course, kol davar shebemida, v'sheba mishkal, v'sheba minyan, Whenever it pertains to an exact amount that was measured, that was counted, that was weighed, right? I asked you to put in 6 pounds. I mean, it was a pretty specific request, right? So there are afilu pachos mikidei oina achayzer. You should know that you could even cancel the deal even if he was cheated by just a drop. Rashi says it's called a mekach tos. I asked you for one thing, you gave me something else. Oina that we speak of is pertaining to something which is sort of given to interpretation, to evaluation, to right, something subjective. But here, it's a clear-cut deviation. I asked for one thing, you gave me something else, right? So as Rashi points out, this would affect even karka. True, oina doesn't apply to karka. That's regular oina, but mekach tos, a mistaken deal. I asked you for one thing, you gave me something else. Deal's over, whether it's karka or no karka. And even if it's a small amount, I can just cancel. Ella rather was speaking like this. He didn't give him an exact amount. He says, look, do me a favor. Throw in whatever the karka needs. You know how much it needs. Turns out he didn't. He skimped, he cut corners. He planted less than he should have. In this case, there was no exact amount spoken of. So at most, you can apply, if it wasn't done properly, he wasn't honest, he didn't supply the goods properly, the way it's expected, the way it's accepted. So at most, he has oina claims. But oina does not apply to karka. Are these seeds considered karka or not? Shall we say, seeds are like sitting in a container. Despite them being in the ground, we treat them as separate entities. No, could apply because you cut corners on the seeds. Or shall we say, no, it's part of the ground. So now your claim is a karka claim, which has no oina. So this question applies to other things as well. We discussed oina. It applies to other halachas from which karka is exempted, right? For instance, the halachas of shvuah. You can't make a shvuah on karka, right? Let's say a person's moide b'miktsas. He partially admits to a claim waged against him, and it pertains to karka. There's no shvuah when it's a karka-related claim. Are kernels in the ground considered karka? Nishboin alein, oy nishboin alein. Kiman deshadim b'kad adamin, nishboin alein. Shall we say it's like sitting in a container and you can make a shvuah? Oy dum b'tlun agavara. Ve'en nishboin alein. Or is it part of the ground? There's no shvuah. Next question. Oy matiron, oy einahu matiron. Right, the Minchas Oima brought on the 16th of Nisan, right? So that's going to allow us to partake in the new grains, the new crops, the new season, right? So the Omer is only matir, only affects grain which had already been around at that time, right? So now this wheat sitting in the ground, Omer matiran, and it passes through the Omer, right? Is the Omer going to permit it or not? What exactly happened? What stage is the planting? What stage are these kernels holding? Either ashrush. Did they take root before the Omer was brought tanina? We have a mission about that. Either le ashrush tanina. If they did not take root, we also have a mission about that. It's not like this. If the seeds had taken root before the Omer was brought, meaning that during the hakrova of the Omer, these were already rooted in the ground, they're considered part of last year's crop to the extent that Omer matiran, when eventually they grow up and they ripen, you can actually eat them. They're part of last year's crop, which had been checked off by this Omer. They were already exempted. But if they haven't yet taken root, by the time the Omer was brought, they relate to next year's season. Asuran, they cannot be eaten until next year's Omer. So, regarding your question of this wheat in the ground, well, it's pretty simple. Rooted, okay. No rooted, not okay. Must be speaking like this. The Chatztinu, he took last year's crop, which was going to be mutter through this Omer. Okay, so he took wheat from before Pesach, which was pending permissibility through the Omer brought on Pesach. He harvested it, and he replanted it right away. Koidim lo for the omer, v'asr li omer, v'chalaf. Now it passed through the omer in the ground. But it had not yet taken root before the omer was brought. So the question is, there's no question. Whatever is going to grow subsequently is going to be related to next year. He's going to have to wait till next Pesach. He doesn't want to wait till next Pesach. He wants to pull it out of the ground, eat it right now. Can he or not? Were they covered? Was this wheat in the ground covered by the omer or not? Oh, so that's the question. On the one hand, are they intact? Are they here, like sitting in a container, and can be covered and addressed and permitted by the omer? Go ahead and have it, eat it. Or no, but once they were planted, they become part of the ground, and they can't relate to the omer anymore. They're in the ground. They're planted. You have to wait until it regrows, and next year you'll address it through the next year's omer. So that's a good question. Take it, we leave it unsettled. Okay, so a brief recap. We had the discussion regarding Demai. On the one hand, when it comes to halachas of achila, we're strict about it. This is according to Rameir, and when it comes to other halachas, we're lenient. We had a Mishnah regarding certain items that are exempted from Mayinah, and a Shvuah, and all kinds of other halachas. What are they? They're Avadim, Shtores, Karkois, and Hagdeshis. We have Psukim for all of them. And we discussed that Schirus also has Aina'ah. And finally, regarding the Chitim in the ground, and we'll leave it as a tekel. All the best to you, and Hatzlacha Rabbah.